We will continue our search from Owens Lake, which has a rather complicated history. Until 1913, it held a significant amount of water that flowed into the lake from the Owens River. After that, the water was diverted to the Los Angeles Aqueduct. This caused the lake to dry up. A 2004 court order partially restored the inflow from the Owens River, making the area a haven for birds. Still, as of 2013, the lake area is the largest source of dust pollution in the United States. The lake is currently a large salt flat, the surface of which is made up of a mixture of clay and sand and various minerals, especially carcinogens. Please note that this is another salt area in place of a dried-up lake with a grid geometry. And that's what we're going to look at now. According to science, Owens Lake was much larger during the last ice age, Pleistocene, covering nearly 200 square miles. The Pleistocene period dates back to 12,000 years BC. This would mean that these geometric basins remember the Ice Age. Beneath these pools, the satellite revealed columnar objects. It's as if an unknown force has overwhelmed them. The image clearly shows how the rock flowed over these objects. The lines we are looking at here is very likely a jumble of deformed and fractured parts of the Earth's grid. On the surface it has formed natural paths, while underneath lie columnar objects. We'll stop here for a moment and go back to the beginning. The fact that many dry lakes with this geometry contain salt. The Bible says that humans are the salt of the earth. When you think about the story of Lot's wife, you might wonder what happened to the other people. If you were in their situation, you would certainly look back and see what calamity is coming upon you. For example, think of the legend of Medusa, the Kraken. Or the movie, Indiana Jones and the Ark of the Covenant. Everywhere something happens to the main character's eyes and death comes. Plato also says that the sea was not salty. Today, salt is in the water and under the ground. How many people on Earth have looked back? Ironically, salt helps us in our daily lives today. So let's look at the details of Owens Lake. You may not notice it at first glance. It is only after the image is highlighted that the lines of deformed structures begin to appear. Although this area remembers the Ice Age and the great pressure of water and ice, it is almost a miracle that anything has been preserved. Some of these lines actually look like city streets. Everything that used to exist here has disappeared. They are still evident in the marshy salt marshes of the disappearing lake. This image is quite exceptional. I suppose we're not looking at grids, but real city roads. They are very similar to urban roads in contemporary American cities, especially in the Midwest. The depth image shows the destruction in the rock into which part of the geometric grid has plunged. Beneath this geometry, there are indications of the presence of gigantic columnar objects. The other columns are clearly visible. The familiar geometry looms above them. Note that a very old lahar flow, volcanic mudstone, flowed over these objects. A large number of these flows are also found on the Nazca Plateau. This photography is very interesting, although it doesn't seem so. There's very likely a column submerged in the rock. This is the trace of the anchoring of the grates. Note that the lines end in a dark area, as if they continue below the surface. The surrounding geometry of the stone partitions is also very complex, although not complete. This image almost gives the impression of a three-dimensional object. It's really not the work of nature or of modern man. California coast. A truly unusual image. Are these columns? If so, they appear to be embedded in the seabed. Edwards Air Force Base is a well-known base intended for testing military aircraft that was built in the Mojave Desert. You can guess where it's located, at the bottom of the dry salt Lake Rogers. There's salt again, isn't there? There are concrete runways and NASA museums. By the way, there are other military bases and also spaceports in many similar places. Let us recall at least the Nevada test site, which lies on the bottom of the former lake, or another area on the bottom of the former Honey Lake and other places. But underneath it all, you'll find another, but real treasure. Let's get to it. The overall view of Rogers Lake with the military and space base is incredible. At the bottom of the image, we see the airstrips. In the highlighted detail we see not only the destruction of the rock, but also a tangle of lines that abruptly end. Note the shape indicated by the arrow. Let's take a closer look. In detail we see the strange geometry of the embankments on which vegetation grows. I've seen the exact same shape as a seaside resort on the Arabian Peninsula, or on the coast of North Africa. In place of the blue line stood new buildings and between them was a park with swimming pools. If I can find a picture, I'll add it to the video. Another detail of the lake with the runway and strange lines. We don't find many traces of anchored grates in California. Well, not wells and watering holes. Bright areas indicate interconnected objects devastated by heat that have become part of the rock. When you look at these shapes, they may remind you of tree roots. This is another consequence of the tremendous heat, and again these may be parts of grates and partitions. The Bible mentions asphalt, and it is quite possible that asphalt also became part of these areas. Asphalt and high-rise buildings that reach to heaven, that is, to God. And one more picture. Here we seem to be looking at anchoring in a dark area. There may be a column under the surface. Lines in the lake brines. Pools also appear here. They are filled with calcareous and saline deposits. The construction of a new town by the lake. They look like blocks of stone, don't they? The vegetation gives away their shape. We now turn our attention to the Salton Sea. Like Lake Owens, it has a troubled history. The lake was formed in 1905 when the Colorado River swelled and broke the levees on the Elam irrigation system. The water spilled over a saline sinkhole where the lake is today. Note that there is again mention of a salt pan. Today, the lake is dead from agricultural activity and drying up. The same was the case with the drying up of the Aral Sea in Kazakhstan, which was destroyed by cotton cultivation. The water that poured over the Salton Basin washed a significant amount of sediment into the sea, and something very unusual began to emerge. The Salton Sea surrounds a large number of these fields. But the ground is beginning to sink and pools are appearing. The groundwater that made farming possible is seeping to the surface. However, these pools are found further out in the desert. We're looking at Salton City on the shore of the lake. The town is very sparsely populated and some of the roads end under limestone hills. Its architecture is admirable. Do you think it's the work of our civilization? The limestone deposits have preserved the place perfectly. Let's take a closer look at some sections. The asphalt is being laid again on the discovered lines. The surface is cracked due to the drying out of the area. The geometry is incredible, and it seems as if the current buildings don't even belong here. Roads are still awaiting reconstruction, some are disappearing under the surface. This is how many cities are being built, not only in America, but also in North Africa and other parts of our planet. The geometry is identical in these places. But the Salton Sea is far from the only ghost town with this geometry, as we will see in the next images. General view of the city in the desert, California City. Basically, there has never been an urban development here. Although vegetation can be found in the desert, these lines are avoided by plants. Just like in other places. It's very strange when you consider how vegetation can penetrate asphalt. A very similar situation can be found in the New Mexico desert. You won't notice anything down on the ground. The geometry of the roads is only visible from a great height. We will use the example of Buenos Aires to show how these lines are used to build new cities. The edge of the residential development in São Pablo Bay is lined with wetlands into which some of the lines of urban architecture run. We will now look at the construction of the city of Roseville. Do you see anything? It's better this way. There's a circle in the limestone bedrock. We see thousands of these all over the world. Let's see what happens next a few years down the road. The circle has disappeared and the old infrastructure of a vanished world appears beneath it. Once again, this place will be used as a modern settlement. Detail of road construction in Roseville. Have you seen roads built like this before? Well, because the surrounding surface is not sanded and cleared of sediment. This is a picture from the Saudi Arabian desert. One of the circles has been cleared of vegetation and sediment. As you can see, a circular grid is emerging. We have already seen the same in the mountains of the Argentina-Bolivia-Chile border. We will stop for a while in Nevada, especially in Nevada's Silver Peak lithium mine. Since they say that repetition is the mother of wisdom, let's remind ourselves that lithium is formed under very high temperatures and radiation and its interaction with the metal. This means that metallic structures must have stood in these areas. The metal pipes in Beigong were very likely well protected by limestone before the catastrophe struck the earth. You can also find something about lime burning in the Bible. From a great height, the lithium mine looks like a jewel set in the desert, which has been polished to an uncanny geometry. At the bottom of the image, a gigantic columnar object appears to lie beneath the surface. In detail we see the extraction of calcareous sediments and the appearance of pools. The geometrically arranged dikes are fragments of huge grates that were fixed on columns. Many other minerals are found in similar pools, very often the salt. Other grates buried in the rock are located near Silver Peak. We'll come back to a very interesting place in Nevada, Pelican Island. This place was very likely named after an actual pelican-shaped island. In fact, it may have been a cutting slab carried by the Earth's grates. Can you see it? Now we will make a rare stop in the New Cairo. We will not find any columns here, probably because the whole of North Africa lies again under a layer of sandstone and limestone. However, the construction of the New Cairo is very special because it is being built towards the desert. In many places, construction machinery is digging tens of meters below the surface and old traffic routes are appearing. In some places, the asphalt has been preserved. Again, this proves, as in the case of the Beigong pipes, that the limestone protected these areas from the heat. Unfortunately, other places on Earth were not so lucky and melted. So let's look at the geometry of the new city, which is identical to others on the American continent. Cairo is so interesting that I'm going to process another video with spoken commentary. You can watch the older video on this channel. The geometry of these places hidden beneath the surface is beautiful. Why such complex shapes? They're only visible from above. For whom? In the left part we can already see the buildings. They were built in geometric patterns. In the right part of the picture, the roads are still partially hidden under the limestone. In the upper part of the picture you can even see the hill that will be excavated. Some of you may have visited Giza and noticed the ruined condition around the pyramids. I was never interested in Egypt. For me the country was something of a tourist attraction and an icon of exploration. As I studied the exposed geometry of the new city, I wondered where the other traces were of ancient civilization had gone. If the roads have survived and have not been melted down, where are the houses? What was Sodom and Gomorrah? As I highlighted images of the area around the pyramids, especially the buildings that science says are the homes of the slave builders of the pyramids, something really struck me. According to the satellite image, the pyramids are built on an artificial limestone hill. This mound was fluid before heat burned the limestone and hardened it into stone. What's even more striking is that the buildings are embedded in the hill. Some are deep, some are visible on the surface. There are hundreds of them, and the dark dots in the image resemble windows. It's as if the buildings have been cut up and dropped into the liquid limestone. Again, we see a resemblance to the Beigong pipes. You'll find the same situation around the Great Ziggurat of your temple in Iraq. Let's take a look. You can also see the original Google Earth image for comparison. And also an understanding that not everything can be seen and a lot of work and time needs to be put into the images. Here we can see very well that the rock was originally liquid. It resembles spatter. Aborigines in Australia say that Mount Cartier was made of clay by two giants. Were they here too? And who else but giants could build such a gigantic work on Earth? Take a good look at this mess of rock. One building is over another building. Here we see large blocks lying around which are again strewn debris. I'm sure we're looking at the windows. It's all been preserved and fused into one with the rock. Finally, let's look at the situation under the Great Ziggurat of Ur in Iraq. See the splash? What's hiding under the temple?